Dr. Kaushal, welcome to the podcast. For anybody that is just now tuning in or deciding if they want to stay and listen and watch, what would you say to them to convince them to listen to the conversation for the next hour?
Do you know what unconditional love is all about? Because I'm going to hook you up.
I love that. And for people who may not know your background, may not know that much about you, can you just explain a little bit about what you do and kind of the field that you're in and why you decided to take the path that you're on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an integrative family physician at Upstate Medical University. I'm the Assistant Dean of Wellness, the Director of Integrative Oncology and Survivorship, and I practice in family medicine. I'm an immigrant. I was born in India, and when I was 7, we moved to Rochester, New York. Grew up in the city in Rochester, New York. At times, we lived in subsidized housing. My parents gave up their careers for my opportunity in the United States. And, then I went to college at RPI or Rensselaer in Troy, New York. And when I was 20, I went to medical school all over the world. I was in the West Indies in Grenada, man. And then I was in London. I was in New York City, all the boroughs, Newark, New Jersey. And I came here to Syracuse 29 years ago to be a rural family doc. So I've done my home visits in the Tug Hill in February and March and practiced in Lafayette as well, where I trained. Then I had a private practice in Baldwinsville, where I live. I was a school doc for the school district for 8.5 years. In the last 14, I've been in upstate. So, it's been a journey.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I had thought it would be when I started. And what I've learned along the way is the more you embrace what's unfolding, the more you can savor the flavor, right?
Ooh, that's good. That's good. And what made you want to get into medicine? Like, what was that journey like?
I was 4 years old in India, and I'll tell you, that's the earliest that I can remember that I wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
To the point where in 7th grade, I had a teacher at our school, Mr. Dickinson. He actually played pro football once upon a time.
Yeah.
From 7th grade, he used to call me doc. He knew that's what I wanted to be, and so he just instilled, at school as well, that confidence of my persona of who I was, walking the halls as a 7th grader.
Yeah.
And he just, from 7th grade on, I was doc.
It was locked in.
That was locked in.
It was locked in.
Yeah.
So obviously, as people dive in, and as I have, health and wellness is something that's huge to you, and it's something that you kind of prioritize. You speak a lot about it. You give a lot of seminars and things of that nature on it. And I was just wondering, what's a belief that you had about health and wellness young that kind of changed over time, and kind of you debunked that through your work?
I think I learned through my failures, right? So, we say dis-ease or problems, right? And you can either succumb to them or you can rise from them. And, having stumbled many times along the way, I was in a 6-year medical program that I failed out of.
Wow.
Right? Which meant I was pretty much out of any medical school, American med school. I had to reinvent myself, right? And so what you start to realize is the joy is in the journey, right? And I learned this. My dad actually instilled a lot of philosophy early in me, from the Hindu philosophy, and I grew up Hindu. And then in college, I actually minored in philosophy. So I read the Bible and the Old Testament, the Quran, the Hindu Gita, a lot on Buddhism. And the fundamentals of all of these teach this philosophy of detachment. And my wife and I have a joke because we met in India through families, and the day after we got engaged, I was talking to her about detachment. She goes, "We just got attached yesterday. How are you gonna detach, right?" And it's detachment from expectation, right? So what happens is now you're not focused on the outcome; you can focus on your input, right? And so if you put your best foot forward, then the outcome takes care of itself. And more importantly, if you learn to embrace the outcome as a result of your best efforts, then where's fear? Where's disappointment? Right?
Wow.
And so then self-rejection goes to the side, which means self-appreciation, self-value, right? That becomes a big part of who you are, not to the point of ego and cockiness and arrogance, right? Actually, it comes from a place of humility, knowing full well you may not achieve what you set out to, but can you embrace the journey? Right? And that shifts the whole equation of your life's trajectory, right? Kobe and Jordan both have said this. You take a shot, you got a 50-50 chance it's going in or not. If you stay hung up on that outcome, the game's still going on. The key is to enjoy playing the game, right? Not for the win or the loss, for the joy of what you're learning in the process, right? And I think that's become my inherent nature moving forward. I have a lot of goals, right? Whether they come to fruition or not isn't really my focus. It's what's the process, right? And can I make progress? Today compared to yesterday, make today better than yesterday, that kind of thing. And you start to realize that you're evolving into something, right? And if you can start to pay attention to that, be mindful, as they say, you either like it or you make a degree of change towards what you want, right? Towards contentment, towards peace, what your true needs are in life.
What do you think is some steps that you could take or you would give to somebody trying to practice detachment in their life? Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially in our society. We're very outcome oriented. We're constantly staring at the destination. We're constantly being, attaching ourselves emotionally and mentally, identifying with the things of the external world. So this idea of detachment, it's very kind of woo-woo to a lot of people or out of this world. And so what would you say to those people?
Well, it's thinking through what happens if the outcome doesn't come to fruition that you want, right? So the expectation is, I want this thing, right?
Right.
Now, what's going to happen if you don't get this thing? You can cry, you can double down, you can learn more how to get towards that thing, or you can change what you want, right? And so part of the thing to recognize for most people is detachment from expectation doesn't mean you don't put your best effort into things. What you start to do is just focus on the process, right, and the progress versus the specific outcome. And think about this. If you have such a narrow focus on what you want, you're actually missing out on all the beauty around you, right? And if you can step back from that expectation, right, what will happen is you had a preset notion as a 6-year-old that you wanted to be a basketball player, right? Now, between 6 and where you are today, you've lived a life, right? If you haven't taken the opportunity to embrace the lessons along the way, and if you haven't allowed them to help you evolve your goals, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, right? But if you actually take the opportunity to say, you know what, my 6-year-old self had this goal. Here's where I am today. When I was young, I had surgery at 7. My uncle did the surgery in India, right? Knee surgery.
Wow.
Right? So I thought orthopedics, right? I mean, my uncle did my surgery, awesome. Then I get to high school, I'm thinking plastic surgery, be kind of cool, right? And then I get to med school, and in my 3rd year, all of the main clerkships that we have, pediatrics, internal medicine, surgery, psychiatry, obstetrics and gynecology, right? Each of those rotations, I was like, this is amazing. I don't want to not be able to do any of this. And so family medicine, I love the outpatient community engagement, talking to people, right? So what I found was I was actually becoming a family doc, right? So I tell students, you don't get an MD and then become the doctor. You got the MD because you became the doctor, right? You don't become anything after the fact. You become the thing during the journey.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so for people that are hung up on an outcome, just be the thing. Be your best version of the thing, and then the outcome, right, takes care of itself.
Wow.
Right?
That's so good. There's a saying by, I want to say Myron Golden, who put me onto this, and he said, be, do, have. It was be, identify as the person who's aligned with the vision or the goal that you have. Do things from that space, and then you'll have things that are aligned with that.
That's
rather
right.
than waiting till you get something to be something.
And if you go backwards from that, right, instead of the doing, start being, right? Because when you do an act, it's you acting. When you're being the thing, you're it.
Yeah, that's good.
Right? You're it.
That's good.
Right? And it's like recently, about a month and a half ago, I had this thought, and I don't think you and I have talked about this. We say go from good to better, better to best. Right? So I woke up and I had a thought, let's flip that, right? And I do have to give something I saw of Kobe Bryant some credit on this as well, right? If you flip it to say good to best, best to better, because best is a defined endpoint. Better is infinite. So on your journey to being better, you'll have many bests. If you focus on being better, it's an infinite journey, right? One where you can celebrate so much, and at the same time, you don't have to just sit on your laurels, because you can always be better.
Come on.
Right? And just when you think you're done, You can take one more breath. You can take one more step. You can smile one more time, like you're giving me right now, right? And the point is, that's better than what it was. And can that be good enough as a starting point and as a resting ground, right? So if every point on your journey is an end point unto itself, you can celebrate it all, right? Again, that savor the flavor. You know, if your life were a soup and you sampled the flavor and you don't like the flavor, how are you going to change it? By adding more of what you like until you find the right balance.
Yeah.
And that's up to you, and you don't put that on anybody else, right?
But we do.
That's instinct, right?
Yeah,
That's
we
instinct
do.
because it's easier to hang the hat somewhere else. But frankly, you know, in life you have two choices. You can choose to be at peace, or you make the other choice. The choice is always yours. You can't point the finger elsewhere because ultimately you got to make that choice, right? And when people say, "Yeah, but I don't have a choice," well, that depends on what your outlook is, what your resources are, and clearly there are situations, you know, in our community, in this world, where people don't have a lot of choice in terms of material presence. But the thoughts they hold on to, we always have a choice, right? And so what we put here and what we hold on to here are the things that feed our soul and our body, right? And if we optimize that, then we can have a different lived experience. And that doesn't mean it's going to be happy all the time, right? However, it has greater potential for greater joy. And that's the best we can hope for, but then more importantly, that's what we celebrate.
That's so good. That's so good. I want to go back to you mentioning failing medical school, because I've had a lot of people, whether it's in a live stream or messaging, whatever it is, constantly talk about the anxiety and the stress that comes from wanting to be, you know, great in whatever profession they're in or whatever degree they're trying to get. And a lot of people have anxiety over, you know, grades and failing and messing up and external pressures and things of that nature. So how did you navigate that situation, and how did you continue to move forward and not let that failure kind of stop you from putting your best foot forward?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, I wasn't even in med school yet. It was in college.
In college, okay.
And it was my second semester, and, you know, personal circumstances led to me just getting off my game, right? And I used to be one of those, you know, high schoolers who used to wonder, you know, how, you know, you can get a C. Is it lack of effort? Is it lack of understanding? What is it, right? And I get to college in my second semester, you know, I missed some tests. I didn't, you know, pay attention. I was distracted enough and I still thought, you know what, I'm smart. I'll take the finals, I'll kick butt, and I'll be fine. And I ended up with 4 D's and an F that semester.
That's wild.
That's wild,
to hear
right?
coming from
Those
you.
are letters that, like, I would never expected to see.
Right.
And so I remember just sitting in my dorm bathroom with the shower on for what felt like 4 hours, probably like 4 minutes, right? And I was like, you know, everything that my parents had worked for, right, to bring me to America and work hard for me, everything that I had dreamed of, that I had wanted to do. And I'll tell you, two of my final interviews out of high school, one was a Harvard interview, okay? And I was like the final 2 people from our area, and the other was a 6-year program. And the Harvard guy said, if you get into both, where are you going? And I told him, I said, I'm going to go to the 6-year program. So he said, you can say no to Harvard, right? And I said, well, first of all, they're guaranteeing me medical school, and I want to be a doctor. You guys aren't, right? And my goal is medicine. My goal is to heal in the community.
Yeah. So
why would I not want to do that, you know, sooner? And I get to save 2 years of college and tuition and all that stuff. Needless to say, I didn't get into Harvard. I got into the 6-year program, and then I failed out of it, right? So after that 4 minutes, the thought that came was, I still got to go. This is who I am, right? So this wasn't a matter of me becoming something. At that point, I was somebody who paid attention to the human condition. I was an RA in college. You know, I played tennis in college. The courses I took, I was an advisor to students. So I was already doing the be the healer kind of mindset.
Yeah.
So what was going to be so different? I can't not be me. And the question was, how do I get on this journey, right? And so when I applied, I graduated in 3 years, actually. And the gift of this failure, which sometimes we don't realize, right, was I got to minor in literature and philosophy. And I was a lazy reader in high school. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make my weakness my strength. So I minored in literature, and in fact, I focused on African American literature because I grew up in inner city schools in Rochester in the city school district. But I was an outsider as an immigrant, right? And so several of my friends would say, well, you can't understand because you haven't lived it. And so I thought, you know what, here's a great opportunity for me to at least learn it through the history, through the literature, right? From the 1600s onwards. And then my assistant coach in tennis was the chair of the philosophy department.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I took one class and I took another. And, soon I had a minor in both. I wouldn't have had that had I gone straight through. We wouldn't be sitting here because I might be somebody different, right? And so we think about failure. When you think about the journey, what happens is if you can actually learn from it, right, then what you do is you actually grow from it, right? But if you use that as an end point, right, then your life's perspective changes. If you use it as a learning point, your life's perspective changes.
Come on.
Right? And so for me, and again, I was 18 at the time, right? So, now at that time I was like, I'm 18, right? Now I just turned 53 yesterday, I was telling you, right?
Happy belated, yeah.
And so at 53, I think 18, come on now, right? But there's a lot of wisdom at every stage of life. In fact, I've learned to have mentors who are coming up behind me, like you, right? For the reason that generationally, I don't have context. I don't know how your generation thinks, right? And so I can learn from you. And if I'm open and humble enough to learn from people ahead of me and people next to me and people coming up after me, right? Generationally, not after me intellectually or philosophically, generationally, we can always continue to learn. And I think failure has taught me that there's opportunity in all circumstance, right? And if you can learn from every circumstance, right? Sometimes a setback is a redirect, right? To a branch that goes to a different direction that might even get you closer to the sun.
Absolutely.
Closer to goal,
Come
right?
on.
So you think you're on a branch that's going somewhere. That branch may have a shorter lifespan, shorter duration, whatever it may be. Might not actually be leading you down the path that you're meant to be on. Who are we to know? We don't know what tomorrow brings. We have ideas, right? We put things out there in the universe. And then the key is the journey in between. Right? And that's the lived experience anyway, is the journey in between. When we're born and then when we pass on and move on, right?
Yeah, something that we talk about a lot on this podcast is taking life with a grain of salt, obviously, but it's perspective. And a lot of the points you're talking about really the distinguishing factor between it being like a burden or a blessing, an obstacle or opportunity is your perspective. So what are some things that you've seen in your journey that has helped you to cultivate a more positive perspective, and what's some advice you would give to people struggling with seeing, the good side of things and always focusing on the bad?
Either way, it's your lived experience, right? I like to say that to my patients as well, that if you're feeling badly, if you're down, if you're anxious or depressed, or you have joy and hope and positivity, either way, it's your lived experience. Which feels better? Right? So we all, depression is usually most people are depressed about a past they can't go back and change. Or they're anxious about an anticipated future. It's not even here yet, right? In the process, they actually miss out on the present moment. So bringing our mind back, right? So my dad passed away a year and a half ago of appendix cancer. About a month and a half before he passed, he said to me, some of the speaking you're doing around the country and talks and stuff when you leave town, I want you here when I go. And I said, well, do you want me in town or do you want me, at home? And he just, his eyes kind of got big and he said, I want you here. And I said, okay. I said, well, I can stop traveling. I can, quit work for a couple of months. I'll hang out at home. I'll stay in your room. I'll sleep on the floor. I said, but I'm going to have to go to the bathroom so that you can't go then, right? And, it was a serious moment, but my point was serious also.
Yeah.
And I said, and by the way, I sleep in another room and I go to work. So, you got a 50-50 shot. And he looked at me like, I'm pouring my heart out to you and you're, making light of it. I said, I'm actually not making light of it. What I'm trying to help you understand is your expectation, right? And your fear of not having the moment is causing you to miss out on the moment we are having, right? I'm here right now. This is an infinite moment. Whoever said, right? The universe never said to measure time in seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. It's a human construct so that we can make sense of things, right? But between this moment and this moment is an infinite amount of time. The real key is, how are you valuing your time? Because when people say, I don't have enough time, right? Well, are you valuing the time you have? Are you making the most of it, right? And the most of it doesn't mean having more things, right? And doing more things. It could be being present with the people you're with, right? And so I ask you, what's your most meaningful relationship? If I had you get out your phone right now and text somebody, right? I love you, I hate you, I miss you. Whatever your love language is with that person, who's that person going to be?
My mom. Yeah.
You didn't say yourself.
Mm.
And that's the shift for many of us. 99.99% of people, I've asked over 1,000 people this question, right? Only 3 or 4 people have ever said themselves.
Mm.
Most of us think of the other, right? We see with our eyes, so we see the world out there and discount the fact that the eyes are connected to this, right? So valuing self is something that people have a tough time with, because the word selfish has a negative connotation. And yet self-care, self-love, self-respect are a good form of selfishness. Most of us aren't selfish enough in that way, right? You know, in relationships, we always think about the other, talk about the other, right? See the other. That other is connected to someone that's you, right? How often do we take the time to actually reflect on even the idea of your sense of peace? What does that mean to you, right? How many people sit there thinking about peace? Their own peace. Most people don't.
No.
So if you haven't thought about how you're going to get there, right? And what we think about is having more, a degree, a job, money, a car, right? A bank account that's filled. All of those things, what we know from science, right, give some degree of joy, right? Ultimately, what ends up happening is you get the thing and now you're on to the next, right? You know, how many times in your life have you gotten what you want and you're like, all right, you know, you enjoy it for a little while and then you're like, all right, what's next?
Yep.
Right?
All the time.
So at some point, what we realize is the things out there aren't going to be the things that fulfill us fully, consistently. And so we have to recognize what peace means, what joy means for ourselves. And each one of us has a different definition that changes. It's a dynamic just like life, right? So periodically, and I love to give the example of startups. It takes 18 months to break even, right? And then, you know, on average, a startup takes 18 months. And then you want to keep going and see how it goes because you put in so much effort.
Yep.
Next thing you know, you're in year 4. And now you think, do I want to sign on for the next 5 or do I want to flex, right? And so if you think about your own life's trajectory in 5-year plans, right, in the working life, that's 40 to 50 years, that's only 8 to 10 plans. That's not a lot of plans. But you can go deeper and not feel like I got to do them all at once, right? I was talking to a patient this morning that it's not always the next step up. Sometimes it's lateral. Sometimes it's 2 steps back to go in a different direction, right?
Wow.
And that redirect sometimes helps us to gain better perspective, right? Can you trust the journey, right? And trust requires faith. Faith requires trust.
I've never heard that before. That's deep. Why do you think so many people struggle with trust and faith?
Well, because we have insecurities, right? And because the unknown scares us, right? And so what happens is we hold on to the known, and then what we do is we have goals and plans based on what we know. So many people, career-wise, right, even will think about, you know, the common knowns, right? Doctor makes this, engineer makes that, right? Podcaster makes this, whatever it may be, the known, right? Sometimes people need to recognize, you know, their own flavor, right? And what is it that helps them to feel passionate and to feel fulfilled? Again, I say this with an asterisk, right? Because in the real world, we have to be practical, right? Food, water, shelter have a dollar value attached to them, right? And so you need to be practical in terms of the foundation you build, and at the same time think about your long-term goals, right? And how you can optimize them, right? In terms of your joys, right? And it's the rooting in the practical and then blooming from there, so that it's still your flavor, right? And you have less distress. Financial, you know, security is one of the biggest stressors people have. Once you get that out of the equation, I talked to another person today about the fact that, you know, they have a job. I said, well, are you optimizing your savings, right? As a doctor, I was just asking. I said, because if that's on a cruise control, Now that's not your worry. Now you can actually go create, right? Versus, what am I doing? Where is it coming, right? And what does that mean in society? Fundamentals, right? Fundamentals, right? Having good knowledge, good content, recognizing what's out there, right? And where can I get the greatest value and performance, right? These are practical points, right? You buy a vehicle, it's a depreciating investment. Are you doing value and performance? Or are you going to go for the glitz, right? You know, there's an example of somebody going in a minivan, and the kid sitting in the back seat looks over and sees somebody driving a Porsche, says, man, they must be rich. And the parent says, that might be all their wealth right there in that car. You don't know, right? So we judge based on what we see. We don't know background. You see the tip of the iceberg and you assume things, right?
It's the same with issues that arise in our life.
Yeah.
We're quick to just label
judge,
them or judge
right?
them as bad. And then that immediately shifts our perspective to viewing it as that, rather than saying, like, you know, what's in this for me? How can I grow from this? What can I learn from this?
And for the other person, giving them grace.
Yeah.
You see the tip of the iceberg and you assume the stuff versus actually knowing, right? How many people in your life that you've met outside of your family do you actually know their life story? Right? Our students have gotten them to look at learning life stories before they get medical history, because you get context, right? The people we work with, the people we're in school with, you know, we see them wearing this, doing that, having an attitude. And, you know, somebody's chipping and you're like, yo, man, that guy got an attitude, right? The point is, where is that rooted?
Right.
Right? Is that rooted in some degree of distress or some trauma? We don't know until we get to know a life story, right? So, you know, we call ourselves friends with people, and how many of your friends do you fully know their life story? You know, it's not as many as you would think, right?
Yeah. It's a great insight. You're right. Something that you speak about in your book, Core 4 Wellness. If you haven't got it, go get it. Buy that shit off. Is the red dot still on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the TV just shut off. Okay.
Yeah.
Something that you talk about in your book is the idea of stress management. And I think I was actually speaking to somebody literally prior to this podcast, and they were just mentioning, yeah, I'm just stress eating right now. They had a pack of M&Ms. And I was like, that's funny, because I'm going to talk to Dr. K about that today. What is some misconceptions we have around stress, and how can we better understand stress to kind of start navigating it more in a healthy way in our life?
So I've got, this is good. I'm glad you asked this, right? Because recently I was thinking about this. So there's distress, okay? And there's eustress, EU stress, right? So distress is the negative connotation. Eustress is good stress, right? So think about this. Distress, right? And feeling distressed is like the wildfire that you can't control, rages, right? And creates harm and chaos, right? Internally, mentally, right? Sometimes physically. Eustress is like the fire on the stove that helps you cook a great meal. You see what I'm saying? So a controlled flame, right, can do good. An uncontrolled flame can create chaos and destruction, right? So to understand stress as fully a negative, right, is short-sighted. Stress has value. Coal gets stressed, it becomes a diamond, right?
Yep.
So stress has value. Point is how we channel it and channel our energy around it, right, and through it to understand, why am I stressed, right? So I tell a lot of people, you know, that if you feel stressed, take a piece of paper, write down everything you're stressed about, and then take another piece and make two columns, right? Line down the middle, things I can do something about, things I can't control. And then you've got an action item list of the things you can do something about. Every time your mind goes to what you can't control, for the same time and energy, you got a list of things you can do something about. You know, did you eat your broccoli today, right? And so there are simple things that we can't control. You know, what are we going to have for dinner? Well, that's something you can control, right? But you take a test, right? We're sitting here in this environment of university, right? You take a test, most people are stressed after the fact. I want to, you know, oh my God.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, you talk about
The
it.
point is, you can't control the outcome after the fact.
Right.
You need to move on.
Right.
It's like the shot, the bucket, right?
Right.
Once you take the shot, get back on
Yeah,
defense,
that's it.
right?
That's it,
Why?
yeah.
Because the game's still going on, right? Stop looking at your shot. Steph Curry doesn't look at his shot
over.
after he's already like turned and
Next
gone,
play. Next
right?
play.
Right? That's his, joy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's this humor as well. But the reality is we get stuck, right?
yeah,
So
we do.
people start to realize when they do this that when they're taking care of things they can control, they're proactively living versus being reactively stuck in a space where you can't control, right? So if you think about the same amount of time, do you want to proactively build something or feel reactively stuck? I prefer to proactively build, right? And move forward. So, 30 seconds and you move on, right? And I say this, and people are like, well, I need 3 minutes. I'm like, fair enough, and the point is, and some people need few days, and I get it,
yeah.
right? You do you, but understand that at some point, if you stay stuck, that starts to flavor the soup of your life, right? And then you're going to continue, and biochemically, cortisol goes up, inflammation goes up, your gut microbiome, the bacteria start to shift. Now digestion gets affected, right? Energy gets affected, right? Physiologic change happening.
Real.
Simply, so the power of a thought and the impact of its ripple is biological, physical, structural, chemical, right? That in itself should awaken people to mind the thoughts they hold.
So what is happening what's happening within us when we feel distress?
Yeah.
Let's do
So
that.
when you're distressed, so cortisol goes up, right? That can affect inflammation, your immune system, blood pressure, blood sugar, and something we call oxidative stress that can lead to cell damage that can lead to precancerous change. In the gut, what happens with high cortisol is actually with the inflammation, the bacteria in the gut, right, they start to shift towards ones that don't actually do as well with getting nutrients out of food and limit the ability for us to release the toxins in the body, right? So now you're triggering cell damage. Stress also has an effect on the lifespan of a cell, right? So there's something called a telomere, which is the clock in the cell. And when you have high stress that's distress, that actually can shorten the length of the telomere.
Wow.
Eustress or good stress can actually help prolong it. In fact, I just was looking at an article this morning. People that get 90 minutes a week of weight training can add approximately 3.9 to 4 years to their lifespan and health span.
Just 90 minutes.
90 minutes a week of weight training, right? That's what, 15 minutes? Less than 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Right? And what that does is that telomere, it actually prolongs it just enough where your cells actually hang around a little longer, right?
Wow.
What's really cool, since we're getting into this a little bit, the eustress, think about healthy food, right? So cruciferous vegetables, right? Broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, spinach, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, arugula. There are some data that shows that 3 servings of those a day can actually reverse plaque in your arteries. They have anti-cancer benefit. And last week I just went to a cancer research conference where they were talking about broccoli sprouts, okay? And what happens is cancer cells, in them, the kill switch for the cell, the clock for the cell's lifespan is dysfunctional, so the cell lives longer, right?
Wow.
Well, normal cells have a lifespan and they die, right? So the T cells in the body which fight cancer, these cells have something called exhaustion that happens, okay? They get tired after a while, right?
Okay.
You go to battle, you get tired, right?
Yep.
So these guys are looking at something called sulforaphane, which is in broccoli sprouts, as a potential ingredient to extend the lifespan of the T cell, giving them more longevity.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So now you can isolate the thing and make a pill out of it, which will take time and research and data and money. Or you can go eat broccoli sprouts as a part of your salad, right? And so giving the power back to people is that's my passion, right?
Come on.
So health promotion comes before disease prevention, right? So you talk about preventive medicine, that's the second step. Because whenever you say prevention, that means you're preventing something, dis-ease, problem, right? Whereas health promotion is a proactively positive. You're building it right.
Wow.
Right? So your nutrition is one of the fundamentals, and my thing is I want to give the power back to the people as much as possible, right? I don't want I don't want to be dependent on somebody else for my life, right? I don't want you to be dependent on others because you have either ill information, lack of information, right? I'd rather you have good information and then you make the choices you make, right? And then you deal with the consequences because you put your best foot forward based on the knowledge you had and your wants and where that overlap is, right? But if you have misinformation, I feel badly, right? So our goal, yours and mine today, but in general, what we talked about, is to get better information to people, kids, teens, right? Because kids get hung up, right? They see what's on the social media, they see what's on TV, and suddenly the glitz and the glamour becomes the flash that they want to pursue, right? Not recognizing the process in between. And if we can help them understand that this is actually good stuff and you're going to be fine, more importantly, be where you are, right? My son is, done with college, he's working, and he's been one of my, greatest teachers along with my wife and my parents. And one thing I learned from him when he was younger was he got into an 8-year medical program, and he got into Georgetown and at U of R, right? And both are excellent schools. And what he realized was that in the 8-year program, his mindset would have been to get to med school, to get through the 4 years to get to med school. And he thought, you know what, these 4 years are 4 years of my life. I want to make sure that I enjoy them so that I can look back and say that was a good time versus, man, I got through that, right? And I never want to live life just getting through it. Right? I don't want people to think that way about their life, but you'd rather want them to be able to, as we said, savor the flavor, enjoy, right, the moments. And that doesn't mean there aren't hard times. But if you're working towards a better version of you through that process, then that's something you can look back on with pride and joy. Right?
Man. I mean, it's those tough seasons that we go through that really develop us.
Absolutely.
Develop our character. Those are the moments that I look back and I'm most grateful for because they led me to being this person that I am today. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of wisdom and stuff.
It's the idea that playing the game, right, by that time, you've already done the work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's in the practice where you develop. You don't develop in the game. You develop in the practice.
It's a great analogy.
Right?
Yeah.
Because by the time the game comes, it should be like, muscle memory, right? And so if you're practicing being that thing all the time, then you no longer have to play a role or play a part, right? A few years ago, I told my students, I said, I stopped wearing different hats. Dr. K, right? Dad, friend, brother, dean. I'm the K daddy wherever I go, right? Right? And you know this about me, right?
Yeah.
And the point is, you be you. And it's so easy to be you versus having to play a part where now you got to figure out, do I have to shift here? Right?
Yeah, that's deep.
So if you can stay true to yourself, the right people will come and be hanging around. And then the people that you're not meant to be with, you wish them well, right? No negativity, right? There's the I wish you well, that's an embrace. And there's the I wish you well, where, you know what, it's time that we part ways. Yeah. And I wish you well on your road and on your journey. My journey's going over here. I say that with cigarettes to people that smoke, right? You better do the I wish you well, right? And you go your way, I'm going to go mine.
All love.
Right? That's it.
Over there.
Peace out, right?
You got to go over there.
It's a mindset.
Yeah.
And that mindset primarily affords you the opportunity to live a life where you can have some contentment, you can have some peace, you can have some joy. And we see so much struggle in this world, right? And so many places of the world right now, frankly, people don't have a lot of control in their life, right? The day-to-day, the household, the threats that are there, et cetera, right? Environmentally, whatever it may be. With all of that, if you can look to the ones that you're with, right, and feel some sense of joy in the ones you're with, and the fact that you have their company in the moment, right? It's a starting point. It's not good enough in some cases, right? But if it's a starting point that can invite some degree of contentment and joy, that is the fuel that then helps you to get through the difficult times, right? So we lean in on love, right? And so this idea of unconditional love, we've talked about this before a bit, right? Is that all the great books talk about love. But humans, we tend to barter with it. If this, then that, right? If you do this for me, then I'll love you. If not, I hate you, right? Or we're done, right? Unconditional love is giving for the sake of giving without expectation and receiving as is without condition, right? And I learned this actually, there was a movie Interstellar, right? And in that movie, they get Matthew McConaughey out. They can't get him back, right, in time and space. And the professor who had originally done the equation had fudged it, but the understudy, ultimately when he passed, looked at the equation and saw two constants were missing. One was the effect of gravity, right? Which, when you think about it, gravity is about relationship, law of attraction and repulsion, right? And the other was love energy. And so I'm watching this movie going, I talk about contentment and peace, two words. One word is love, and actually that's what all the great books teach. In fact, every civilization has come to the same conclusion, right? And yet the next civilization, like a teenager, won't listen to the ones that have gone before, want to prove it for themselves, right? And so we just keep cycling. What if we accepted that conclusion and lived it out? So I started talking to patients about love, and then suddenly I realized it's not just love, it's unconditional. And our heart, actually, has been showing us the way all along. The human heart beats 86,400 to 144,000 times a day. Normal heart beats 60 to 100 beats, right? I've done the math, right? Every time the heart beats, it sends off blood, doesn't know where it's going, doesn't know what it's going to do, doesn't even know if it's going to be received or not, but just keeps on giving unconditionally. And we use the symbol of the heart for love, right? So literally giving love unconditionally. And when that blood comes back, it doesn't know where it's been, it doesn't know what it's done, it doesn't care what shape it's in. Without judgment, it simply opens up, embraces it, nurtures it, releases again. Receiving love unconditionally. If our heart can do that 100,000 plus times a day, how can you not embody that, right? And more importantly, what it does is takes away the hurt, the pain, the distress, the expectation, right? Because now you can embrace the whole thing. The person who's looking for the rose misses out on the beauty of the tulips because they're so focused on the rose, right? That famous saying. So when you start to embrace all of it and see the beauty in all of it, there is amazing, right, lived experience to be had.
It's beautiful.
Right?
Putting myself in one of the viewer's shoes, I may ask, or I may say, Dr. K, I don't feel like I have anybody in my life. You know, I feel like I'm not getting love from anyone. The environment I'm in is very toxic, very stressful, and I feel like I'm just very isolated. What would you say to somebody like that?
So about 4 years ago, my wife had gone to help my brother-in-law. This was during COVID, and they live out west. And so she'd gone for like 4 months. And so one day I was at home standing at the kitchen counter, eating my dinner, looking at my phone messages. I look at the dining table, which was empty. I'm like, ain't that something, right?
Yeah.
I thought if any stranger walked in right now, we'd be plating the food on some nice plates, sitting down, the phone would be away, we'd have a nice conversation. And I thought, if a stranger is worth the 5-star treatment, I'm worth the 5-star treatment, right? So what I did was I plated the food on a nice plate, took a nice picture, sent it to my wife and my son, and said, yo, check this out, right? And I sat down, put the phone away, I had a nice meal with myself. What I realized in that moment was, I'm never by myself, I'm with myself, and I like myself, and I got good company. Right? And that mindset shift of that, I don't have anybody in my life, right? Have them rewind back to the meaningful relationship thing, right? You have to be your own most meaningful relationship, right? These are certain truths that are in the good books. We just don't pay attention to it, right? The reality is because then loneliness goes away.
So true.
Right? We're having conversations in our mind all the time, right? I'm talking to somebody. You have a thought right now. It's going to somebody. That's you. So be with yourself, not by yourself, right? Lean into yourself. In fact, when I do my morning, like deep breathing and meditation, my heart is like a cup. I literally fill it with love. The overflow first soaks me head to toe. The world then gets the rest as the overflow unconditionally. They want to step on it, I wish them well. They want to embrace it, I wish them well. However, I fill my cup. So when we expect others to, right, what ends up happening is now we're just giving up the reins, right? For our emotional stability, it becomes more challenging because now we have an expectation. And more importantly, it's like a marionette. You don't have control, right? And not that everything is about control. However, what you do realize is there's opportunity in self-love, and then what they give becomes bonus, and it's just so much sweeter, right? Versus this is a cog that it has to fit, right? Otherwise, I can't even accept it. I don't know how to embrace it. If I'm already complete and I got something more coming at me, that comes on top of. I'll take it, right?
Come on.
If there's a little bitter there, you know what? The tongue has a spot for bitter on your tongue. I'll take that too, right? Savoring the flavor isn't about only one flavor. It's about the whole, thing, right? The complete sphere.
Sure.
There's value in everything. Joy, fear, hatred, anger, sorrow. All those feelings we get are rooted in something. If we can pause to understand why and then release, then we've learned the lesson. If we don't pause and we just stay stuck there, right? We don't learn to move forward, then what happens is now that starts to root itself deeper and deeper and deeper. That becomes challenging. And that's my experience over the last 3 decades in terms of just working with people, is when it works well, it's a person who has that ability to bounce back, right? The bounce back ability, right? What's that saying? The champion is the one who gets back up one more time, right?
So true.
We all go down,
Yeah.
right? Get back up.
It's resilience.
Resilience, right? And resilience isn't something that you have to feel like, oh my God, it's a burden, right? It's opportunity. And more importantly, what it shows is, look, in your life, or however long you lived it, there's no guarantees when you go to sleep that the sun's going to rise in the morning, but it does. At some point, right, we all, if you think about it, we're all trusting. We all have faith when we go to sleep.
So true.
And at the end of the day, if you have contentment and peace, you're not even worried about that next moment because you're already there. Right? A person at 50 who passes away contented and peace, we're going to celebrate that life. Right? Somebody who's 80 plus, 90 plus, whatever, 60 plus, 40 plus, who hasn't figured it out, we feel badly for them. They're struggling, right? So you can continue to struggle, and it's your lived experience, or you can think about 1 degree of change towards your contentment peace, whatever that may be. Texting somebody once a day, I love you, I miss you, right? Doing 5 extra push-ups, drinking an extra glass of water, right? Smiling a little bit more, right? All those little, it's a 1 degree of change, but it's no longer that thing. You're no longer that person because you made that 1 degree of change. And that's not hard. 180 is hard. And I always joke, don't do 360. You'll end up back where you were.
Facts.
Right? Like, oh, I'm going to do 360. I'm like, nah,
Nah, don't.
Then we'll just be back here tomorrow.
right.
So 359, 361, 1 degree of change.
Yeah.
Right, is really what you want to think about in life when you feel like you're not at that place. And if you're at that place, ride the wave, right?
Something that kind of ties into that loneliness, and it kind of brings up the point about not being at that place, is the lack of purpose that a lot of people feel, right? I know you speak about spiritual wellness in the book and in your talks and stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about, helping people navigate that sense of purpose and having some sense of spiritual foundation in their life. Because I've realized in my life, I don't really care like which path you take. Just having some sense of faith, some sense of spirituality helps so much to stay grounded and aligned with the better version of myself.
And people have to get there, right? Like you had to get there.
Absolutely, right? It's a journey.
So
like
we can tell people, this is good for you.
Right.
That's nice, right? But, no matter what age we are, we're just older kids growing up, right?
So true.
And so that reactionary part of it is, well, if you're telling me, it must not be, I'm not doing it, right? If you press it on me, I'm not doing it, right? So people have to get there, but we can seed, right, the thought. So this idea of purpose, we don't even ask kids what they want to be when they grow up anymore. What we ask them is, what do you want your purpose to be, right? What meaningful contribution do you want to make? And if somebody just reflects and starts even just, journaling on that, right? Just start writing, right? What do I want my purpose to be? So purpose isn't, I want to be a millionaire. That's not purpose, right? That's outcome, right? So you think about purpose. I want my purpose to, leave the planet better. Okay, how are you going to do that, right? So the point is you have a thought for a purpose, then you think about, okay, so what's the journey? What's the path from here to there? But most of us don't reflect on words like contentment, peace, purpose, right? Meaningful contribution, right? And so what happens is the joys are short-lived because they're not deeply meaningful enough, right? Nowadays, you play sports, you get a trophy, you win a championship, right? And what was it this past year?
Yep.
Right. One of the players just said they won a championship, and they said, it was good for 3 minutes or 30 minutes, right? And then they said,
that's the NFL.
NFL.
Yeah, Super
Yeah, he
Bowl.
said it,
Yep,
right?
yep.
I forgot the player, but it
Yeah,
was
from the
wonderfully.
Eagles, yep.
Yeah, wonderfully said. He's like, that came and went,
Mm-hmm.
right? That, I was playing so hard for so many years for this thing, and I'm here, and it didn't fulfill,
Mm.
right? And so what we start to realize, so that wisdom that comes, again, is that if your happiness is hinged on outcomes, you're going to yo-yo through life. If you get it, you're happy for a bit. If you don't, you're not. When you have a sense of durable plenitude, a sense that I am enough, that I am good, and you focus on just developing yourself to be a better person. It could be physically, it could be developing a skill, it could be mentally, emotionally, communication style, right? Are you the root source of joy within your environment, or are you the source of discord,
Mm.
right? Actually, to pause and think about that, that's a deep, deep space to be in, right? Because people will easily put fault elsewhere, blame elsewhere. That's not what we're asking. Are you the source, or are you the root source of one or the other? And if you're the source of joy, right, great. If you're the source of discord, right, what's happening? Where you at,
Mm.
right? And if you need help, asking for help, it takes strength. Right? Most of us think it's a sign of weakness, right? Asking for help takes strength, right? My funny on that one is when I go grocery shopping, I go right away to customer service and ask them exactly where the thing is.
Mm.
I don't want to be walking around for a half hour not finding the thing, right?
You're right.
Right?
Right. No
So,
point.
they always say men don't ask for directions.
Right.
This man asks for directions right away, right? Because then, you know what? It's more efficient for me, right?
Yeah. Right.
Now, does that mean I miss out on all the middle aisles because I'm looking for the broccoli, or the asparagus? Heck yeah, that's not
Mhm.
where I want to be anyway from the nutrition
So true.
perspective,
So true.
right? So for
Mm.
people to recognize purpose, right, you have to sit there and actually jot things down. You have to kind of have those sessions where you just make notes, right? Doodle, whatever that gets your mind actually thinking about it. And it's tough for younger people. And for younger people, what they need to realize is I need to sample the flavors of life to
Yeah.
know, to the point where, not that it's going to get me in harm's way,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of the things that are going to be healthy and build me up, build me
Mm.
forward, right? So talking to people, finding mentors, right? These are great ways. If you don't know, the best way to find your purpose is to lose yourself in the service of others. That's a great saying, right?
Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah, help somebody else, right? You got one hand up, the other hand should be pulling somebody up,
So true.
right? So if you got an empty hand, you're not fulfilling yourself,
Mm.
right? And your potential, right? So that's the way I think about it,
That's good. Jay Shetty said, passion is for you, purpose is for other people.
right?
And passions can help you to express your purpose.
Absolutely,
You know.
right? And the point is both things matter, right?
Yeah.
If you're passionate about your purpose, right, and your purpose invites passion, that's great.
That's a very congruent circle right
That's
there.
exactly right.
I love that. I want to talk about, this just came to my mind. I don't know if you have any research or background in the field of temptation, especially amongst the younger population. That's something that I get a lot, especially from young men, is, I'm constantly falling into temptation, whether it's lust, whether it's food, whether it's, diving into the wrong things. What's your understanding of temptation, and how can we start to navigate that subject in our life? If you have any, yeah.
So there's a song,
No.
Temptation is a part of your life. It doesn't matter if it's wrong or right, right? Temptation is a part of everyone's life all the time, right? It's everywhere. So the good books actually teach, right, again, to come back to recognizing that when I take an action, there's going to be an outcome and a consequence, right? And if I can also own that, then I can choose accordingly, right? So, again, it's a dopamine hit, right, is what it is, brain-wise. And so when you have a temptation, what is temptation, right? It's looking at something, a situation, a person, right, a thought, and thinking, yeah. At the same time, what is temptation, right? What is temptation? Temptation is telling you, I'm not sure this is right, but I'm liking it. and I'm wanting it.
That's exactly how the voice sounds.
Right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Now, if I'm not sure if it's right, step back before you step in, or you might just step in it, right? You see what I'm saying? So if you're tempted to do something, step back and really reflect on that, right? If you're motivated to do something, that's different. If you're purposed to do something, that's different. But if you're tempted to do it, right? That's a whole different feeling, right?
You're so
then
right.
you got to step back. So is it a temptation? Is it I'm living out my purpose, right? Is this my mission? What category does this feeling fall into? And once you know that, you know how much to dive into it or step back, right? And so I think about it that way, right? And again, you asked me on the spot, and I'm just telling you, this is the way I think about it.
That, yeah.
If you've got a temptation, step back before you step in. Get the lay of the land. If you got a purpose, lean into it. And phone friends, get help, right? Find like-minded people, right? So you talk about drugs, you talk about, you mentioned lust, those types of things. Again, you already know, right? Because instinctively what you know is this is not right.
Right.
I'm tempted, right, to try, right? But if instinctively you already know it's not right, lean into that instinct and step, right? Because if it's meant to be, then somehow you're going to keep coming back to it. And then what you're going to say is, am I serving my purpose through this? And if I'm not, then I need to step.
That's real. That's real. That takes awareness and intention. Awareness and intention. And I think a lot of the stuff you talk about require awareness, obviously, because you got to have awareness in order to see certain things and then go down the process of shifting them. When you're speaking to your patients, how do you help them to become aware or bring more mindfulness into their life to start being more aware of the things that you're trying to help them navigate?
Yeah, so there's a practical set of tools that people can use, and especially for goal-oriented people. There's something called a SWOT analysis, right? Where you basically, the SWOT is you assess your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities that you're seeking, and then the threats to your success, right? And then from that, you can actually make what we call SMART goals. So SMART for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So now you're getting very granular, but it's black and white.
Yeah.
And you have a defined plan, and you can look at where the hurdles are, where the barriers are, what resources you're going to need, right? And then figure out who to connect with to help you get to goal. And then you assess it over time. So we call it a plan, do, study, assess cycle. So you keep coming back to it periodically, recheck your trajectory. Do you need to, make adjustments? What do you need to do, right? So that's the practical way of doing it. For patients, part of the issue and part of the things we talk about are, again, having a goal. So you go to a doctor and say, I want to be healthy. Okay, well, what does that mean for you, right? For some people, it's the numbers. For some people, it's a mindset, right? For some people, it's getting adequate sleep. For others, it may be having regular bowel movements, like whatever it is, right? The fundamental thing is getting clarity on broad terms helps to focus better. Right? And so helping people get clarity and giving these examples helps them to know. So I think one thing that, as a leader in a community, you do talks, we talk to people all the time, is when we give tangible examples, what that starts to do is gets their mind going for what their own life's journey is and story is, right? So people need, you can get philosophical and you can have concepts that are kind of out there in the ether. That doesn't really help the person on the day-to-day. So you need to give day-to-day examples, and that's a lot of what I do with people. I'll give day-to-day examples, recipes, etc. And now with, a fun thing to talk about is AI, right?
Yeah.
So AI is going to go in all kinds of directions.
Right.
You can go into, but a potential value, I can actually use AI to help people have a 2-week menu before they leave based on their health conditions, their food preferences, right? That includes their budget, right? And a grocery list, right?
Really
simply before they leave my office.
That's
now,
leveraging the AI in the right way.
100%, right? Because now you're leaving, you can go straight to your grocery store, right? And you have a list of how much of what you need for the next 2 weeks to get what you need to get done for your health benefit, right? So when we give people specifics, they now see the roadmap. When we give concepts, they have to figure out the roadmap. And that extra step is where sometimes we all, as humans, falter because it's effort. And again, it's effort for whom? For the person I don't see, that I don't consider my most meaningful relationship. And so I put myself on a back burner. I don't have time for that. You know what? I'm giving it to you. You don't even need the time. You're going to go grocery shopping anyway. Here's your list. Now you don't even have to go walk in the aisles. You know exactly what items you're going to get.
You know exactly what it is.
Right? So all of us need that kind of direction at times just to move us to the 1 degree of change. Now, being consistent, right? Being persistent, that comes from within. If you have a passion for it, right? And how truly committed are you to your own betterment and your best self, right? And so that becomes a personal journey. And I don't judge people on that. Sometimes people are consistent with it. Sometimes it requires that, quote, sense of failure to actually rise up again, right? Sometimes you don't know what you got until you lose it. I've had people who end up having strokes before they quit smoking. Wish that weren't the way, right?
Right.
And most people are motivated to change behavior based on two things, either the fear of failure or the benefit of the reward. And we're all one of the other. So you got to know yourself. You got to do a self-study. Am I a fear of failure person when I've made big choices in my life? Am I a reward-oriented person who'll do what it takes to get that reward because I want it so badly? If you're reward-oriented, you look at the circumstance, think about all the benefits of doing the work. If you're fear-oriented, think about all the consequences of not doing the work, right? So it's now your internal talk, but as healers in community, as people who help other people, this is where life stories matter. What's their internal language? Because your message has, in order to be effective, has to be in the language that they understand and resonates with them.
Oh, that's deep.
Right?
Yeah, that's deep.
Otherwise, we're not effective. I start speaking Hindi, I've lost part of your audience.
Yep.
I got 1 billion people who suddenly will tune in India, right? But, right? You see what I'm saying? That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, knowing the language of your audience, knowing the mindset of what helps them to make choices, helps the person advising to then craft the message in a way that's going to resonate. And more importantly, be in a language that these people understand. Then they make a choice. And we respect that.
Wow.
Especially if it's not intended to harm themselves or others.
Another topic you speak about is mental and emotional wellness and things of that nature. I've realized that when I went through my personal mental health struggles, I realized how much of a factor your mental health was in all aspects of your life. And then recently, probably in the last year, I realized how much of a factor your emotional health is and how they're so tied in. And I realized that a lot of people are kind of on autopilot with how they navigate their life based off of the internal environment that's going on, whether it's your mental state or emotional state. For me, I prioritize focusing a lot more on the emotional state of things. Like I realized that if I allow fear, guilt, shame, judgment, lack, scarcity, those emotions to kind of drive my vehicle, that's going to be the lens in which I look at life through, and that's going to be how I navigate things. And I've seen that in my personal life, whether it's family or close friends, with how, you can get so consumed by fear or lack or a scarcity mindset, and that's literally all you can fixate on when you're thinking of a certain outcome or you're having to navigate, stepping into something new in your life or whatever it may be. And I think it's the same with mental. So what's your understanding of, mental and emotional wellness, how they coincide, how people can start to become more aware of what's going on within themselves, in their mind or in their brain, however you word that, and to navigate it in a more healthier way.
So it's interesting because when you were describing it, for mental, you pointed to your head, and for emotional, you pointed to your heart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So the head and the heart, the mind and the body, right? Mind and the brain and all of that stuff. Yeah. And so fundamentally, you think about emotion is the result of, right? So mental health has to do with, when you think about it from the science, biochemistry. So thoughts, right, evoke feelings, which evoke emotions, right? And in each step of that chain, there's a biochemistry that's shifting, right? Now, that biochemistry is also connected to your gut, right? So that gut feeling, right, is actually real, Because what happens is the biochemistry, serotonin especially, is a hormone and chemical that's a brain chemical and a gut chemical. In fact, there are more receptors in the gut for serotonin than the brain.
Didn't even know that.
Right? And so the idea that food affects mood is real. And when you think about mental health and emotional health, right? So mental health has a science behind it as well. Emotions are the result of, and so you think about thoughts and feelings, and you think about expectations, right? So when emotions are evoked, they're the result of connecting our thoughts with either an outcome or a potential outcome.
Wow.
You see what happens?
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So if you think about the emotion, how does it even have an advent, right? I have a thought. I'm going to go hang out with Isaiah today, right? So that gives me a feeling. I feel good about this, right? And the emotion is I am happy, right? I'm going to go hang out with Isaiah today, and he's going to throw me some curveballs, and suddenly the emotion is angst, right? Like, oh, am I going to have the right answer? Will I know what I'm talking about?
Wow.
So depending on how you approach it, right? And so the thoughts, feelings, emotions, there's a continuum, right? And it comes back to the thought and how long you hold on to it. Right? So if somebody has a history of major depression, which is a medical condition where, in the brain chemistry there's a different balance. I won't say imbalance, a different balance that tends to lead to more depressed feelings, right? Can we over time help them to learn, right, to bring their mind back, right, from that feeling, right, from that thought that's causing that feeling towards something that evokes a different feeling that leads to a different emotion, right? And so that over time can work. Now, can we fully get people there? Some people need the benefit of medication. Why? Because of the different balance, to the degree that things like mindfulness and meditation on its own might not do it. In fact, there's data that says when somebody has severe depression or severe anxiety, to tell them, yeah, you should meditate on their own, that's actually a dangerous play.
I can see.
Right? Because what happens is when you're severely depressed, you don't even have energy to act on things. And so then you do that, and now you get a little bit of energy, and now you might actually act out on things, right? So they need guidance, they need, supervision and support, right? However, mindfulness is a great tool for helping people to retrain, right?
Yeah.
Where's your focus, right? Where you look is where you go, right? And so where are we focusing our mind? So we do meditation, mindfulness training for our students and our staff, actually. We just, every Tuesday, we have something called Tranquility Tuesday, and that's what we do for 15 minutes.
Wow.
We sit and we breathe, right? And the point is, during that time, you allow the thoughts to come, let them sit for a while, and then come back to your breath. Now, over time, can you sit with a thought and release the thought and get better at releasing the thought, right? Right?
Yes.
And so if you feel depressed, acknowledge it, right? The minute you acknowledge it, the minute you resist it, it stays longer because you're like holding it back, which means it's there on the other side, pushing. The minute you embrace it and release it, you're letting it flow through, right? So if I'm blocking something, which means that thing is always there, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm allowing it to flow through and release, and I get better at the release, now it has less of an imprint on the biochemistry, but on my presence, right? And technically speaking, that's a lot of what cognitive behavioral therapy, psychological counseling is meant to be, right? And some, are good, some are better, just like, everyone in every career.
Right.
Some are better, some are not. Some people focus on identifying where the issue is rooted. Others help people to get to the next level, right? To move beyond it, right? And so actually my wife is, focused on, part of her work is actually on helping people to be happy. And so it's a wonderful thing, right? But you have to at least, and I won't say but, every time you think the word but, audience, try to use and instead of but, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's a conjunction that builds upon versus a block.
So true.
Right? So even every word that we say, every word that we think, we start to use a positive psychology towards the words we choose, And what happens is we feel differently. I said and I smiled. You smiled, right?
Yeah, it does.
And so what
change it.
happens
Yeah.
is, we have to understand that we're all starting at some place, right?
Mhm.
So I had one lady who said, I visit the valley sometimes, right? She was low mood. She was calling the valley. She goes, I visit the valley sometimes, and what I've learned is, from the valley, everywhere I look, the view is beautiful.
Mm.
So, right? So when I ask people like, hey, how are you doing with your nutrition? They're like, oh, not so good. I'm like, well, that's a great place to start.
So good.
Because think about it, the lower you are, the little change becomes a big deal, right?
So true.
Right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So when you're feeling really low, it's a great opportunity,
Come on.
right? And when you're feeling great, fly higher, right? So if at the worst of times you give the best of yourself, then at the best of the times you can even be better, right? And the work is in giving the best of yourself at the worst of times versus giving up, right? And so many people give up thinking, well, I got no shot. The point is you got all the shots because any direction you go is going to be different than this, right? If I got nothing to lose, I got everything to gain, which means what? I can try. Trying gets me further than not trying.
So
Not
real.
trying leaves me in the same space. Right?
That's what fear can do too. Fear can make you not try because you're so focused on everything that can go wrong.
Yep. And it's, face everything and rise.
Yeah. Right.
FEAR, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the point is, whenever you have fear of, quote, failure, recognize, and you can shift that to thinking, am I afraid of success?
Mm.
Because if I try, I could actually succeed, right? So the fear of failure stops you from actually getting in the game. Well, if you're not in the game, how are you going to win?
You can't.
You're not,
It's impossible.
right? And so giving it a shot and learning something from it always brings you further ahead, right? I mean, think about it in baseball. Somebody bats 300, that's 30% success. And they go into the Hall of Fame.
Facts.
Right?
Facts.
Right?
Facts.
Basketball, less than 50%, and you're in the Hall of Fame,
Mm-hmm.
right? We don't even think about that, but like when you start to put perspective on things, you don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to get it right all the time. Lean into your intention, right? Lean into your intention and intend to do well for yourself and others, right? Our CEO, Bob Crona, has a weekly message, and at the end of it, he says, be kind to yourself and be kind to others. What a beautiful message.
So simple, but so profound.
Yes, and the thing is, when you're consistent, right? So, a main man, Denzel, has a great saying, right? Discipline and consistency in order to achieve your dreams. Because without discipline, you're not going to get started, right? And without consistency and commitment, you're not going to get to goal. Double down on yourself, right? The worst that happens is you come out better.
Mm.
The best that happens is you come out better. Right? Come out better.
That's a bar.
That come out better.
That's a bar.
Right?
Yeah. So for somebody struggling, I had somebody recently reach out and say, I'm struggling a lot with fear. I've had people reach out and say, I struggle a lot with, self-judgment, guilt, shame. You would say to start working on the mental thoughts and things of that nature in order to shift those emotions? Or
Actually start writing down, right? So when you're
okay.
afraid of something, right? Write down what you're afraid of, right? And the minute you give it a finiteness by putting it on paper versus in your head, where it's like enigmatic and it's like this huge mountain, right? Today I was thinking about it. No matter the size of the mountain, right? You're going to go one step at a time.
Straight up.
So take that next step, right? And the point is, somebody who reaches out, right? That's a sign of maturity, right? That's a sign of wisdom. And the point is, they're looking for support. And sometimes us supporting, right? So this is empathy and compassion, right? You feel badly for somebody who's afraid, who's scared, who's got depression, who has anxiety. We feel badly for them. Owning their emotions gets heavy for both, right? So empathy and compassion, right? A lot of people say, oh, I'm an empath, right? And it's like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm an empath, right?
Yeah.
That's a heavy thing. So what I say, right, and this is, you're hearing it first on the waves here, right, is be an empath selectively, but be a compass, compassion, right? So be a compass. What does a compass give us? Direction, right? Support, right? So to have compassion, letting people lean on you as they need to while they resolve it, right? So they're not going to fall because they can lean on you. They can ask questions. They can reflect with you without judgment, right? And so, you can ask them, do you want a solution? Do you want me to listen, right? Or do you want to just reflect? Depending on what they want to do, you can be that resource for them, right? Because our instinct is to solve it for them, right? Like, oh, well, you should just, right? Sometimes people just want you to listen, right? And that's okay. Just to be present with somebody is okay. So what I would say to those people is the fact that you call somebody is a great thing, right? 2 is start writing about what you fear, right? And start writing about what success would look like. Because part of being stuck in fear is you don't see the success.
Mm-hmm.
The minute you get clarity on what you define what success might be, now you got a goalpost to aim at, right? But if you haven't spelled out success, where are you going to go, right? Fear is real. Having coaching, having counseling, having mentors, right? We should all seek them. I personally, one time I was actually chair of a department, right, early in my career. And the chief operating officer of the company asked me, who are your mentors, right? And I said, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran. And he looked at me, he goes, no, I meant people, right? Like, who are the people? I said, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran, Buddhism, right? Old Testament. What I said to him was, there's good knowledge, right, that's been consistent from civilization to civilization. At some point, you can embrace that, and the messages are very simple. It is unconditional love, right? It is, the 10 Commandments, right? It's the fundamentals that help us to respect others as we wish to be respected, and to respect ourselves as we wish to be respected. And we don't always do that, right? So when you sit in fear for a long time, would you ever advise somebody else to do that? No. What advice would you give them? Can you take that? And we all, right, especially adults, but even teenagers are actually very wise in many ways, right, often. And if you give them the opportunity to actually reflect on what advice they would give others, and then think which piece of that advice might you apply for yourself today, it's a great place to start, right? And you do this, and I'm not making light of this at all, so people shouldn't think of it that way. You do this with some kind of support, right? You never have to tow it alone. There are enough resources in community. There are enough people, that can absolutely help somebody to navigate. Part of it is seeking, right? And the other part is availability, right? Being available, right? Available, affordable, affable are like the 3 things, right? And so, there are many people within the health system in town, but there are many leaders in town, you being one of them. I give you a lot of props for the work that you're doing, because what you're doing is shining a light on something that's much more common, right? That people want to kind of pull a rug over sometimes, right? Because that's the part of society that's difficult. And yet that's the part of society that has so much beauty and potential, right?
You hit.
Right? And so why can we not be better for our community? Leave our home better, right? And the people that are here, if we can put a smile on their face and help them to see hope and the potential. That doesn't mean all of us are going to be the same. In fact, we're not all the same, right? Be the best version of you. Right? I have students who come to med school who think, if I don't get to be a plastic surgeon, like I failed. I'm like, why don't you give yourself an opportunity to blossom and actually learn to love who you're becoming, right? Our goal is to help them become the best doctor they can be, which is become the best version of you, whatever that means. And you don't even know yet because we're continuously blooming.
Facts.
Right?
Facts.
Can you be open to the blooming, right? Versus being so narrow scope, right, that you start to clip the petals before they even get a chance to fully bloom.
Oh, Dr. K, man, that was great. Before we end, I just want to know if there's anything that we didn't touch on that you want to touch on before we
we've touched on so many things that, I think the one thing is that I want people to recognize that, happiness is something that we proactively invite on a daily basis in our life. Joy. And at the same time, And I got to give a shout out to my wife on this one. You know, she often reminds me, she's like, you know, I'm human. I'm going to feel all the feelings, right? Anger, fear, sorrow, you know, grief, all of those things, frustration. And, you know, what we talk about is how long you stay there starts to flavor that soup of your life. So just savor the flavor, but every so often sample the flavor. And if you don't like it, right, what are you going to add to find that rebalance towards your sense of contentment and peace? Let that be your barometer on that compass, right? So be a compass, and on that compass, lean in the direction of your contentment and peace.
Mm.
Anything that takes away from that, right, think about where your priorities lie.
Yes, sir. And the final 3 rapid questions. You can answer these in 1 word or 1 sentence max. The first is, what's the worst piece of advice you ever heard or received?
Go for the money.
I love that. Flip side, what's the best piece of advice you ever heard or received?
Serve your purpose.
Mm. And if you could create 1 law that the whole world had to follow, what would it be and why?
Unconditional love.
Mm.
What that allows is for acceptance, forgiveness, and to actually see people for who they are, rather than putting our filters and biases onto them and projecting, right? So if there was one master key to the whole thing, it's unconditional love. Learning to give for the sake of giving and receiving as is. And if you can be the embodiment of unconditional love, it's a whole different lived experience.
So true. Dr. K, everybody, I appreciate you, man.
Thank you very much, Isaiah. And
Yes.
peace out.
Yes. Peace out.
Yes.
My God.